Shalom, everyone, and welcome back to the Rabbi Avi Show. Today, we are diving into a conversation that is as urgent as it is sobering. We often talk about history repeating itself, but usually we say that as a warning for the distant future. My guest today, Oleg Cohen, is here to tell us that for those with the eyes to see and the memory to recall, the future is already knocking on our door. Oleg is a dear friend and a member of our congregation here in Tucson, but his journey started thousands of miles away in Irkutsk, Siberia. Before we get into the heart of today's episode, you need to understand the mind of the man I'm talking to. Oleg is a man of immense intellect. He holds a degree in theoretical nuclear physics from Russia, has an MBA, and has spent a career navigating the highest levels of the tech industry from Israel to London to Boston. Today, he is a successful entrepreneur working on the cutting edge of AI. But Oleg also carries a different kind of expertise, one born of necessity in the Soviet Union. He grew up as a Jewish kid in the society where being different made you a target. He lived through the collapse of the USSR, a time when the official taboos against antisemitism evaporated, replaced by open, unchecked hostility on the streets. I invited Oleg on the show today because he sees something happening in America right now, on our campuses, in our cities, and in our social circles that feels hauntingly familiar to a Soviet Jew. We're seeing a lifting of the taboo against Jew hatred, often thinly veiled as anti-Zionism. Oleg didn't just watch this happen. He decided that the weak Jewish kid from Siberia was a relic of the past. He became a black belt in American Kenpo and now spends his free time teaching self-defense to Jewish students and families, helping them to build the physical and mental muscle memory needed to navigate a world that has suddenly become much more volatile. We're going to jump right into the conversation as Oleg begins to explain how his background in the USSR shaped his view on self-defense, the horseshoe of political extremism, and why he believes the American Jewish community needs to wake up to the reality of 2026. Oleg Cohen, welcome to the Rabbi Avi Show.
Thank you, Rabbi. It's a pleasure to be here and really appreciate you inviting me.
Can you tell our listeners a little bit about your role in self-defense and how you got there, and how does that relate to where you came from?
Sure. It's martial arts in general is a big part of my life. I did get involved in martial arts in '94 when I was already in my mid-20s, and really fell in love. I grew up as a typical Jewish kid in Siberia, mostly being afraid of being picked on. I was never into sports or being physical. I had a little judo sting, but I couldn't wait to get out of it. And so I always felt that I couldn't defend myself, and it sort of weighed on me, and I sort of just found a coupon and joined my first Taekwondo school in Middletown, New Jersey, and sort of fell in love with it and started really working on achieving my advanced belts and doing things. And even though I had quite a pause, I resumed my training in 2016 in Bedford, Massachusetts. Achieved finally my black belt in American Kenpo, And at that point, I decided to start looking into teaching self-defense. And this was sort of a mitzvah I thought I would start doing or offering. And my teacher actually at that time said, you got to give back to the community, and that might be a way. So I created a curriculum. I also think that what prompted me to start teaching, little self-defense seminars to friends' kids in the basement of our home in Massachusetts was that there's been quite a bit of violence towards Jewish students on campuses, right? It was way before, October 7 and what we're seeing today. But I got a feeling that people should be able to defend themselves. Mostly girls were going to colleges, and some of the things that I thought would be useful for them and some peace of mind for their parents to maybe, achieve some skills. And ever since, I kind of evolved this whole self-defense curriculum. I've been working with different teachers and reading books, really not about martial arts. It's about really giving Jewish people some basic skills of awareness and ability to get out of difficult situations, not be an easy prey, not be easy picking, so to speak. My first class at a shul in Needham, Massachusetts, where over 50 people came. I never charge for these things. I try to have people make donations to causes. It's completely for me to kind of give back and give people some basics, like some very bare basics on how to behave themselves, how to be aware, how to defend themselves, how to avoid difficult situations. Had a pleasure of teaching a couple of seminars here at Beit Shalom. Definitely happy to do this for any other congregation or group of people. It's a lot of fun for me to teach it. I've really developed this curriculum over quite a bit of time at this point, almost 10 years. And I think it's useful, and especially now that there's quite a bit of violence, really open violence towards Jewish people. And again, just remembering my experience back in the Soviet Union where you feel completely helpless.
Let's talk about vulnerability that you have seen going back even to your youth and the other Jewish people around you in Siberia.
Well, it's so I grew up in Siberia, and as opposed to other parts of former Soviet Union like Belarus or Ukraine, where there are a lot more Jewish people, Siberia was somewhat special. There was no open hostile anti-Semitism as something that people actually experienced in other republics. Towards the end, I think, or when Soviet Union started falling apart and, a lot of Jews started leaving, for Israel or for the United States, sort of anti-Semitism, blossomed at that point, and there was, attempts to actually for open violence or, people picking on you maybe outside on the street. But in general, growing up, I just felt that was different. But also, I was not into sports. I didn't know how to fight. And I always felt sort of that was lacking in my skills. And in general, I think it's the same thing today in the United States. Jewish people are usually good citizens. We don't fight. We don't create problems. We focus on education and doing other things, right? And I think a lot of Jewish kids are not physically strong and perceived as weak. And I think we cannot be weak. We should come across very strong. And everything resonates today to sort of my childhood.
Let's talk about your childhood.
It was as long as I can remember, especially growing up in Siberia. We have a very small Jewish community, and I didn't know much about actually being Jewish. practicing sort of holidays and everything was, illegal, and we didn't have a synagogue. I mean, I knew we had a Jewish cemetery. My grandfather was, he passed away in the 70s, and he was buried there. So that's how I knew that we had a cantor who could, do a prayer and sing.
Only for some for funerals.
Only for funerals. So there used to be a synagogue. It was restored. Some people from the U.S. and Israel gave money. So it was restored in '91. There used to be a synagogue, and it was completely just a pile of garbage, and there was some old, but you could come in and you could see it. I somehow saw it being restored. I didn't even know it existed. It was on the same street where my grandmother lived.
Wow.
And so we didn't really know much. Me personally, I started being really interested about who I am, Jewish, because it turns out my great grandfather was observant. And there was quite a bit of stuff left. He passed away a year before I was born, but in my grandparents' house there were things that I didn't know what they were, and now I know. It was the tefillin, and there were kippahs, and there was a siddur, and there was a whole Shalom Aleichem collection of books, the language that I didn't know what it was, right? So I was asking what it was. And my grandparents also, they kind of kept us safe in their own mind, right? They knew Yiddish, but they would not use it, right? So we were in a cocoon, but then the environment lets you know. Right? The kid starts calling you names.
Yeah, how does that manifest itself? The environment.
The environment was hostile just because you look different. Russia, as you know, for the most part, especially Siberia, is a particular stereotype of people, right? Light haired, light featured, and it's a podcast. I am dark featured.
Yeah.
Very.
So you're very Mediterranean looking. You look like your ancestry comes from the Levant. What we call the Holy Land, and that region of the Mediterranean. And these people looked like they were coming from Northern or Eastern Europe. Very light skin, very pale complexion, blonde, a lot of blonde hair, blue eyes type.
So the kids they didn't like other people who didn't look like them. And, they maybe didn't even understand. Later, there were people who did understand, and, I was in fourth grade, somebody called me a dirty Jew on the street. So it's, things started kind of happening. They didn't happen daily, but also I think one of my paternal grandmother, she was from Odessa, and experienced a lot of anti-Semitism. So she kind of, when I was 5, 6, she started telling me, and probably even against my parents' wishes, that you're Jewish. You're Jewish, they don't like us, you need to get prepared, you need to, if you want to get, A, you have to get A3 pluses, that you're going to experience difficulties. I didn't really understand, I was little. Now I kind of remember. And things happened, over time, you get passed on for this. At school, you're kind of singled out, college, and things happen. Luckily I left when I was, my early 20s. We immigrated to Israel, made Aliyah, to be correct, and never looked back. That country did not make us welcome. Jews really contributed a lot, did a lot of stuff. We had a very small Jewish community, but extremely prominent in that town, probably about 3,000 people out of 600,000 people, and did a lot of contribution all around, and it didn't make us welcome. So people say, do you miss it? I don't. I never did.
You told me about a couple of incidents that stand out. We were speaking offline. One was this anti-Semitic professor that you had in physics, and another one was a confrontation that you had where you were kind of loading up a vehicle. Can you speak to
Yeah,
those?
yeah, there were, very different. I studied theoretical physics, and it just happens that in Russia, probably 75% of theoretical physicists were Jewish, were Jews. It was just such a, very popular field, physics in general, physics, math, but that particular branch of physics. And one of the professors, he was the only one, everybody knew that he was chronically anti-Semitic. And I didn't even know why he was actually a member of that department, but he could not show his anti-Semitism against his colleagues, and they knew he was such a person. But if God forbid he saw a Jewish student, he would just unleash. And we had history. He did know my father, who was a part of the staff there and was a professor, and we he went extra way to make my life very difficult. He accused me of not doing my homework myself. He said, I can't believe this quality of work would come out of you. Your father probably did it. So he was accusing me of sort of things that he would never tell other students. And also my scientific advisor was Jewish, Professor Zhitnitsky, and he said, you guys are very similar. And I kind of went back and I responded and I said, because we're both Jewish. And he got really scared because I guess nobody really calls him much on that or called him on that. Later, I had one more class, and that's the only B that I ever got in my scientific classes, because he actually refused to use books written by Jewish professors and Jewish authors in theoretical physics, which is really crazy.
Because most of the books are written by Jewish
Because most
people.
most books are great books, and just my father is a physicist, and we had tons of them on the shelves at home. Right, I grew up looking at Landau and all these like very famous books, and he completely prohibited them from being used in his course, and he used others which were just not good, by Ukrainians and Russians, just out of spite. I think that was his thing, and I refused to study by those. He said, even if I get the right answer, but you did not use the books, I'll lower your grade. And I said, I'm okay with that. I'm just not gonna compromise. For me, it's Landau, and I did answer everything, and he gave me a B. So yeah, that's one of the situations.
Tell
The
us,
other
yeah, tell us about
the
the other
other
one.
one was, it was crazy. I think, I don't know how many people know, but Soviet Union was sort of collapsing for some time, right? And Jews started leaving in like 89. We were not the early departures, right? We kind of waited for a while. And so we were leaving in 92, and this was after the coup and the Soviet Union collapsing, completely disintegrating in 91, right? It was in August of 91. And it was kind of downhill, from that point on. And my dad and I were outside, probably a few months before we left, and loading the car, and I was helping him. And these two guys came. It was 9 o'clock in the morning, and they used the derogatory, the Žid.
They called you Jid.
Žid, yeah, the Yid, right? That's from, Ukrainians used to do that, Žid, right? That was the derogatory, and they were like, get in the car and give us a ride, and they were very obnoxious, two guys, and nothing else provoked me to go berserk. And I had nunchucks, which at that point I didn't even know how to use, real rosewood ones. I don't remember how I got them, and I was kind of losing it, and I was trying to start a fight. And again, I didn't know how to fight, but that was so offensive. So, and I remember that my dad was gonna grab me, and he just like pulling me away, and he said, just remember what the goal is. We're leaving. We're done. We're just don't end up in jail. and somehow they just left us, be, because they saw how mad I became. And that I remember that moment vividly. And I think I hear that it went really much worse from that point on, but we luckily left.
Is that because kind of what you're alluding to? And I appreciate you sharing that story. In reality, a lot of the Russians just had it in their blood. Maybe they drank it with their mother's milk to hate Jews. But in the Soviet Union, technically, officially, they weren't supposed to be engaging in anti-Semitism. But now the Soviet Union had collapsed, and now they were kind of free to be.
They were free to do it. It became allowed. And if you kind of look at what's going on in the United States today,
talk about that.
Yeah, this is probably a good segue to sort of how I see it. And I've been doing a lot of reading and research. We are maybe not to the same degree as what's happening now, but we're familiar with sort of this anti-Semitism in the society. We were so happy when we moved here. Well, obviously moved to Israel and then moved here to sort of find that no anti-Semitism, right? I mean, virtually, nobody shows it. It was really not on the surface or anything, but because it was a taboo, right? There was a taboo on it. It's just like in the Soviet Union. It's not allowed.
Mm-hmm. In the Soviet Union, you also couldn't be Jewish. You couldn't practice Judaism. Here in the United States, of course, we're allowed and encouraged to practice Judaism.
Yeah, you can.
But at the same time, you have like the practice of Judaism. So on the one hand, the Soviets were like not allowing Jews to know who they were, but they weren't allowed to be hated. Here, we're allowed to know who we are. We're allowed to really get deeply involved Jewishly, and also it's illegal to have hate crimes and to instigate, but it's not illegal to hate us.
It's not illegal, and it was, Nazis marched on the streets, and free speech, Alan Dershowitz,
Sure.
Out of all people, actually defended their rights, even though he hated those people. But the quiet and people changing their last names, even in the United States,
Sure.
right? A lot of actors, and. I mean, people just change last names, and in the Soviet Union, a lot of people just got pseudonyms, right? I mean, this was just a normal practice, right? Because your last name would sort of, quote unquote, give you away. Although, we also said that your face is gonna.
Your face gives you away.
Your face gives you away. Everybody knows, right? Everybody talks about it. Everybody knows you change your name, but your grandparents or your parents didn't change your name, so we know where you're coming from. But sort of open, hostile, physical violence was not allowed. And then I think what happened was, along with sort of like everything falling apart in Soviet Union, they just stopped being a taboo, right? So that became openly hostile. Right?
And how do you see the connection here?
So the connection here, I think what happened really after October 7th, 2023, is that taboo got lifted here. And it was always there. Like anti-Semitism doesn't go away, right? It goes into hiding. There's a taboo. It sort of, goes like a slow evolving disease, right? And then it morphs and manifests itself. And now is anti-Zionism. But anti-Zionism was always here. You're not allowed to be a Zionist, right? I mean, this is just like really you're a fascist in a sense. But what really happened quickly, after October 7th, that even that line got blurred immediately, right? It's like, kill the Jews on campuses and everything. And these people seen that the governments do nothing, right? Local governments, we had a terrible federal government, right? There's basically no punishment. and it goes way beyond free speech and everything. It's real violence. It's real calling to kill Jews. Here in Israel, everywhere. So that's what I'm seeing, right? That's what I'm.
And it's alarming, isn't it?
It's horrible. It's alarming beyond beyond conceivable. It's very hard for us to see. I think it's hard for everybody to sort of even observe, and I realize how terrible it is for the American Jews, for people who are born here, who are really citizens, have no other citizenships or passports or alliances, just being singled out and turned into second-class citizens, like in Germany, right? It's not even going back to Russia, right? I mean, everybody is now saying, and I agree, that we're seeing Germany of the
Of the 1930s,
right? So this is kind of probably that alarming and concerning. It's one of the reasons we moved from Massachusetts to Arizona, right? Massachusetts is now horrible. Is really, there's open demonstrations, and I kind of started seeing that happening, and the kids are brainwashed at schools and everything, and we moved. So here it's better, but there are some other issues, right? There are issues here as well, and so hard to see. We've got to do something. Speak about it, educate people, learn self-defense, learn about firearms,
yeah,
everything, right? We did the other class. A few of us here got together and said we gotta, because Jews started running buying guns, right? This is
right.
Luckily we do have the Second Amendment, but it's it's responsibility. You got to know what to do. So some of us got together here and did a sort of a little seminar. In addition to the self-defense, as to a basic intro into firearms, which is again very useful.
So we can protect ourselves.
So we can protect, and people know how to get started. It really is. We are in a very different territory, I think. Alarming. I don't know if you saw it. It's kind of fresh off the press, but there are talks about British Jews being offered asylum in the United States because of alarming rising antisemitism.
I did not see that.
It just started popping up like yesterday.
I'm not surprised, and
I'm not surprised.
We have, you and I have talked about this before. We see it from everywhere. We see it from the extreme left and from the extreme right, and it's kind of like a horseshoe, like you've said and others have said, that there's very few things that many people can agree on, and one thing is that they all hate Jews, and they can call it realizing that 95% of us are Zionists. And what is a Zionist? A Zionist is somebody who believes in Jews having the right to live in our homeland. That's it. It's not about the minutiae. You don't have to agree with everything that the Israeli government is doing. I happen to think the Israeli government's doing a pretty darn good job, but you don't have to agree with that. You can criticize the government. Jews in Israel criticize the government. It's a free liberal democracy there. There's only 70% of the population in the state of Israel is Jewish. The 30% who are not Jewish, including more than 20% who are Muslim Arabs, are totally free, are in the government, are and on the Supreme Court, are overrepresented in really high level professions like pharmacy.
56 or 57%.
56 or 57% of pharmacists in the state of Israel are Arabs. That's something to digest, and that's something you won't hear on the cover of the New York Times or on CNN or many other, or even ABC. You won't hear that stuff. And not only that, but physicians are overrepresented by the Arab population. And that is juxtaposed to what you see going on, just to take it so you can see what really is happening in the Middle East and the way that it has been being taken out on Jews in America. If you look at what's going on around Israel, look at Syria. We've had more than 600,000 people being killed by their own people, murdered. In Egypt, you have genital mutilation among girls and women at high, alarming rates, and nobody's screaming about it. Lebanon, Palestinians are not allowed to be citizens in Lebanon, Syria, many places in Egypt. Anyhow, I could go on and on for hours and hours, and everybody blames the Jews. Blame the Jews instead of putting it into context. There is a problem. There is a conflict between Palestinian Arabs and Israeli Jews. But it's not even just Jews. It's even the Arabs in Israel many have become very patriotic since October 7th. Many are choosing to serve in the armed forces and the defense forces. Anyhow, that's the backdrop. And here in America, our people are being blamed and scapegoated, and the libels against the Jewish people. And you're watching that, Oleg. You're watching the libels. You're watching the protests on campus, on university campuses, and these thugs know that they can go and intimidate our people, and that's exactly what's happening.
Universities do nothing about it. I have to give a lot of credit to the U of A. Like my daughter's at U of A, and I think the U of A, out of very few colleges that did the right thing, obviously Florida, but others, kids are not safe. California, Massachusetts, and there's a lot of lies, right? I'm an Israeli too, right? So I immigrated, I'm a citizen. My whole family lives in Israel, right? The lies about the white colonizers is horrible.
Yeah.
You go to Israel and actually whites are,
even Ashkenazi Jews, we look like we're from the Middle East because our ancestry does come, but Ashkenazic Jews are in the minority among Jews. The majority of Jews come from Middle East and North Africa.
In North Africa.
Exactly.
And nobody, Israel is a great country. I mean, resilient, strong people, just really, they're loud and, but they're great, right? And every time I go, I'm at awe as to how countries developing so much contribution that
in the midst of and they're it's a pressure cooker.
In a war, right? It's in a war basically ever since it was founded in 1948, and it's just war never stopped, right? In the country, and and you could see here is a lot of lies. There's a lot of misrepresentation. It's left and right, and people are uneducated for the most part about what Zionism means, what we're going through. Might be a topic for another podcast. And I see that not a lot of Americans are non-Jewish Americans are active in sort of defending us. And I am kind of surprised. Mm-hmm. Not totally shocked, but surprised. And, after October 7th, a few people in my social circle who were not Jewish, they quietly on the messenger reached out.
But they didn't want to do it publicly.
And I shamed them. I said, why didn't you post anything? I did openly on Facebook. Is why I'm not hearing from you, right? Why you guys are not loud about the atrocities and about all the stuff, right? Look what's going on in Iran now, right? The campuses are all peaceful.
You're talking about the lack of non-Jews, lack of Gentiles really standing up and speaking out on behalf of Jewish friends.
I think moral courage is lacking. I mean, I called a lot of people on it. Everybody had a black square. Everybody had, no hate. It's like everybody, and Jews were there, right? I think
we were there for every cause.
For every cause, right? And then what I've seen a lot, because I started after, even before I was in all these different groups and forums, but I joined a whole bunch more, and I was a lot more active.
Like online forums?
Online forums, mostly Jewish forums. And, well, what happened was, one thing is a lot of people just realized that they're Jewish, as opposed to just Americans, that they're Jewish Americans or Jewish who are Americans, and they started coming into these forums and saying, my boyfriend left me, because they don't like Jews anymore, right? And I was like, he realized that I'm Jewish, and I actually am, pro-Israel. I was,
So you were hearing the horror stories of.
Yeah, so they're like, a lot of people came and said, all of a sudden I have no friends. It was mind-boggling, right? It was just like people, just saying, hey, these are my people, right? And it was brutal. It was horrible. It was, and somebody says you defending genocide, right? I mean, and then we're no longer friends and stuff. So this has started happening. We know, friends all around, like Gentiles were yelling at them, and then severing like years of friendship because we dared.
Thinking also that Israel has committed genocide. It's complete nonsense. But that's how they're behaving toward us and blaming us for their malperception, really, of Israel. I have to say, and it was the very first episode that I launched on this show, or dealt with my friendship within the evangelical pro-Israel community. So we do have friends out there, but and they are working tirelessly to support us, and I got to say it's much appreciated. And we just had Bondi, the beach horrific massacre in Australia, and we were lamenting that, and that was kind of a good example of, hello guys, this is what you're preaching, and this is what happens to us. They just come and start killing Jews, and we were just sitting there kind of at an all-time low, and out of the blue we had a pro-Israel elderly Christian woman who came and decided and made a donation to our synagogue to help with security, and she wanted us to know specifically that she was with us. So there are positive stories out there, and we don't want to draw focus away from that, but unfortunately it's commonplace to hate Jews, to hate us because of Israel, and they should be, in my view, and I think in your view, I know in your view, all Americans should be loving Israel. Muslims should be loving Israel. Everybody should be loving Israel, respecting and being in awe of what Israelis have done to help to achieve. I feel like I'm on a soapbox now, but I mean the innovation and the breakthroughs, the medical and scientific breakthroughs, whether it's with water and desalination, whether it's with irrigation, whether it's with combating diseases, or all sorts of other breakthroughs. We wouldn't even be having this conversation with the technology that we're using. I'm sure a lot of the parts were made in Israel. And so, and it's kind of ironic that everybody who's hating on us, they're using platforms, computer platforms, that we even wouldn't be there had it not been for Israeli scientists and Israeli engineers. And that's the irony. So where is, what do we do? And we really don't know. There's a lot of turning our heads in all sorts of directions. I think your approach to say, look, let's just deal with on a very basic level. Let's make sure that Jews can protect themselves.
I think we should take care of the basics. Just as in martial arts, they say, always focus on your basics.
Yeah.
Right? No matter how advanced and sophisticated, you have your basics, and the basics will save you one day, because that becomes your automatic memory, right? Under stress and everything, all that fancy skill is probably going to go out of the window, but your muscle memory, your everything. So we just need to build that muscle.
And one of the things in self-defense and in martial arts is to know where the door is and how to get out. And that's kind of like where our people are. I think our people have always been we try to do the best we can, but we always have our eye on the door. Jewish people are always wondering, when is it that we're going to have to flee this place? And God forbid, Jewish people have been involved in the founding of the United States of America long before that the United States was a country. From the middle 1600s, you had Jews coming to this country making a huge difference in all sorts of ways. And they had to prove themselves because people, every step of the way, were reluctant to let Jews. And every step of the way, we've made a difference. And George Washington appreciated that, and so many of the presidents and leadership of the United States has appreciated the Jewish contribution. We're really praying that there will be a happy ending to this kind of disgusting chapter of anti-Semitism couched in anti-Zionism in this country. And your perspective, though, drawing back from your experience in Russia, in the Soviet Union, knowing what it feels like, and talk about muscle memory. You have that muscle memory. I think it means a lot to us, so we can learn from that.
Well, we just want to recognize things as they're happening, right? Be vigilant. Try to do our best to, it's our home, right? Make sure that we're comfortable and safe here, stick together, fight as much as we can, learn all the sort of basic skills and hope for the best, but,
Be prepared.
be prepared.
There was one other thing that I almost forgot that you mentioned when you and I first sat down, and there's a song that your wife shared with you. Do you want to tell our listeners about this song?
It's a very, very funny song. It's on Facebook, and somebody came up with the song. It's in Russian though, and it's kind of funny, and a very good guy sings the guitar, but the basic premise of the song is saying that we back in Soviet Union used to be the ones picked on, and we were weak, and everybody again sort of like for their issues were finding a Jew nearby to pick on and take their anger on. And these days the situation is different. We have these strong Jews, and we'll tear you apart for the little piece of our promised land. And it just sort of like, again, look at Israel, look at the strength of our people in Israel, and maybe feed off that strength. Be proud of what we achieve here, who we are, but also look at how strong Israel is. And just again, I want to thank you for inviting me to the podcast.
Thank you for coming on here to the Rabbi Avi Show.
Great.
If you have enjoyed this episode, please rate us well. And if you have it in your heart that you'd like to support us, go on to patreon.com/horizontal media. Thank you so much, Oleg Cohen, for gracing us on the Rabbi Avi Show.